We ready? Okay, good evening and welcome to the Wenham Select Board meeting for July 9th, 2024. It is 6:30 and I will call the meeting to order. Please note that our chairman, Peter Clay, will not be able to join us this evening and I will be chairing the meeting in his place. We'll ask for roll call attendance as we are on Zoom and this meeting is being recorded. Here, Deirdre Parati is present. Gary?
Gary Cheeseman present.
Ben?
Ben Timon present.
Karen?
Karen Ager present.
Thank you. First up on the agenda, we have public input. 10 minutes is reserved for public input, 2 minutes per person, and we ask that you only speak once. Participants wishing to address Select Board during public comment, please do so as we are in Zoom by virtually raising your hand. Please identify yourself by name and address. Select Board may not deliberate or vote on matters discussed during public comments, but that are not on the agenda. And we will be discussing the public comment policy later this evening, but for tonight, I would ask that public comment happen now during the public input section, with the exception of if there are board and committee representatives here to speak to a particular issue within their purview, such as the Master Plan Advisory Committee on the Master Plan agenda item. We'll entertain those at the time, but otherwise, all public comments, we would ask you to go ahead now. Can you let us know if anyone has their hand raised?
I see no hands.
Okay. Okay. We'll go on to reports and announcements. Just as a reminder to everyone, we've been asked to submit our reports and announcements in advance so that they can be placed on the agenda. So as there are none listed, we'll move forward except for one item that has come to our attention today. Town Hall staff was notified that some residents had received flyers about 3A zoning in their mailboxes, and there was some confusion about whether this was town-sponsored correspondence. So we would just like to clarify that it is not. This is from a private group or organization. And as a reminder to the community, please ask everyone to be mindful of the fact that it is in fact not legal to use mailboxes to distribute items that have not gone through the U.S. Postal Service. And I will quote from their website, "No part of a mail receptacle may be used to deliver any matter not bearing postage, including items or matter placed upon, supported by, attached to, hung from, or inserted into a mail receptacle." So we ask that people are mindful of that. Thank you. First item up now is correspondence. In the packet, we have emails from Courtney Ashwood and Lawrence Oak regarding their request to the Select Board to prepare or request the preparation of an amicus brief in support of the Milton case in the MBTA zoning litigation. So I will open that up for discussion from the board.
I'll have some comment if Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. So I've read those materials and I've read the flyer that's distributed today by a group that's opposed to Section 3A. And I know that people have strong feelings about the issue. As I've mentioned before, I think that our planning board has acted very responsibly and well in having us as the town of Wenham in a position to comply with the requirements of this state law. I do not support having the town join an amicus brief in support of the town of Milton position in the Supreme Judicial Court case. That case is going to be argued, I believe, in October. And so the SJC, has the issues in front of it. They've been briefed by one side, by the Attorney General, and that brief was included in the Select Board meeting packet. The Town of Milton brief isn't due yet. I believe it's due somewhere around the beginning of August. And so it'll be interesting to read what the Town of Milton's position is. But I would not support joining the group of some municipalities. Hamilton may in fact be one of them that is staking out a position in favor of Milton's position. I personally favor the state's position in the matter as one member. I'm not advocating that we file an amicus brief in favor of that position either, but I personally would be opposed to joining that effort on the anti-Section 3A side.
Thank you, Ben. Gary or Karen? Gary?
Yes, I would agree with Ben. I see the issue as being determined in the judiciary. Certainly, the governor's office and the legislature have developed this policy, and I see no gain for the town to get into the legal brouhaha at this point. That if the result comes out one way or another, we would follow it. But right now, I think it's better left to the larger cities and towns to sort this out.
Thank you. Karen, anything to add?
Yeah, Ben, I'd have a question. I've tried to find out the number of municipalities that have actually signed this, or in addition to Hamilton. I don't want to fall. I don't want to fall on a sword if we're the only ones doing it, but I also am a huge advocate for supporting our local towns. So I'd like to know how many have signed this, or how many have participated in it.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, Karen. I think that the flyer that was circulated today purported to list some of those towns, but the flyer had so many inaccuracies in it that I wouldn't want to attest to the list that it included as to that question. So I don't know the answer to that. I do know that, and this was something that I think Margaret Hoffman posted on the MBTA community's page of our website. There is a running graphic that is being maintained by a planning organization led by Judy Barrett, who some of you may know, and is a planning consultant for a lot of cities and towns, that shows the number of municipalities within the MBTA communities sector that have either passed the zoning or have met whatever benchmarks of compliance. And I need to pull that up to look at it, but there's several dozen communities that are in compliance, as in having actually passed the rezoning that in Wenham is scheduled to be put up in front of the special town meeting in September. But I don't know the answer to your question. I'm sorry to say. My own position is based just, thank you, Steve, on the merits of the issue, and so I don't favor it regardless of how many towns are signing on to the amicus brief, but I don't know how many have signed on.
Yeah,
My only concern from a town perspective is, are we the outliers? If our neighbors in tow have signed this, and it doesn't hurt, I don't understand why we wouldn't adopt that. But if there's a feeling against that, I can hear both sides of that.
I think if I understand it correctly, it's not a matter of signing on, Ben, you can correct us if it's wrong, but it's actually the production of your own town's amicus brief. Ben, is that correct?
You are correct, yeah. That's my understanding.
I know there's one law firm out of Linfield that is that has represented the group of Rockport citizens, not the town of Rockport. I want to emphasize, but a group of Rockport citizens who have filed a lawsuit separate from the Milton matter. So there's a firm out of Linfield that represents that group, and I believe that firm intends to write one amicus brief in support of the Milton position, and then it would just list the towns that have signed on to that. That's my understanding. That's how it normally would work, as opposed to, 15 separate amicus briefs from 15 different cities or towns. But I don't know that for sure. But my understanding is that it's a matter of signing on to one amicus brief that would represent however many towns sign on to it. What Steve has put up is what I was referring to. So, and it's updated through June 4th. So the communities in green, and you can see there are 2 or 3 dozen have already passed the rezoning that makes them compliant with 3A. So I definitely don't think, Karen, in response to your point, in my opinion, we would not at all be an outlier in declining to sign on to an amicus brief. I think that probably the way it'll shake out is that the number of towns that sign on to that are actually smaller than the number who aren't signing on, and or those that have already complied. But again, my personal view is based on other factors, but I don't think we would be an outlier.
And sorry, Gary, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, see from the chart, the numbers I read, 71 have already voted for this, and 12 disapproval. So it's running 6-1 in favor, as well as we said before that, this is a governor's priority and the legislator's priority to provide affordable housing, which we all know is a need in the Eastern Massachusetts area. So I do not see any reason for the town of Wenham to sign on to an amicus brief.
Yeah, I would just add my own comment. I agree with what Gary just said and what Ben has said. And I actually feel that the balanced approach for our town to take is to proceed as we have been doing with the planning board and their work, proceeding towards compliance, while at the same time watching, as everyone will, what the outcome of the Milton case is. And there seem to be a number of towns, organizations that are going to weigh in. And I think I just don't feel that we have anything specific to add to that. So for me, the balanced approach is to stay the course and adjust according to what happens in the fall. Any further comments? Okay, this is not agended for a vote. Certainly could be requested to come back at a later time, but I think for this evening, that's where we'll leave it. Okay.
We have some hands raised. I don't know if you want, we have a bunch of hands raised. Yeah.
I think we've.
I can't actually see them.
You did outline that you weren't taking comments. We will.
Yeah, I did ask for public comment to happen in the public comment period. Just preceding this.
But currently, just Madam Chair, for your knowledge, it's Courtney Ashwood has her hand raised at this stage.
Gary?
I think we've covered this. We should move on. I don't think you already set the policy this evening for the public comment.
Okay, thank you. Courtney, sorry, but that was the request to do public input at the beginning, but you can certainly come back at the next meeting. And we have your correspondence as well. All right, we are going to take an agenda item out of order, out of respect for Vicky's time, who is here to speak specifically to item F on the agenda, which is the Town Hall HVAC electrification discussion and request for the Select Board's authorization to move forward without pursuing geothermal study due to time constraints with the ARPA funds needing to be committed to an allowable use by December 31, 2024. Thanks. Vicky, are you going to start or?
I'll jump in. So the reason for this is so the town, just to give some background, the town identified the HVAC replacement as a relatively critical need within the town hall. We have humidity problems that are requiring each room has its own, I don't know what a good term is, but like monitor heater that serves as the air conditioning and heating through either, forced refrigerant or forced hot water. And with the humidity, they are being forced to double duty as a dehumidifier when they're changing the temperature of the air. So we have significant amount of condensation building up and rusting out the drip pans, and the water is running down the inside of the walls of town hall and down into the basement, causing water damage. So this was originally identified and was going to be replaced relatively quickly with an in-kind replacement with fossil fuels. And we had got a quote or two about it, and our ARPA funds were dedicated to this project. However, it was brought to the board's attention that there could be some air quality issues in the town hall. So we connected with the state's Department of Air Quality, I believe, and they came out and did a study and made some conclusions and recommendations for the town. The town was then able to be awarded a electrification grant to explore the option of electrifying the HVAC with the town. So we pursued that avenue and had the study done. They came up with some preliminary numbers and things we would need to look at. And then that leads us to where we are today with needing to move forward with, at least pursuing the grant to acquire the funds to do an electrification upgrade, because the cost to move to electrification is significantly more than an in-kind replacement. And the Climate Action Committee has, not in a formal way, but would like us to look at geothermal. But geothermal, and this is why, Vicky, from amongst other reasons, is here. They can talk a little bit more about it, but that would displace the folks at town hall. Would have to close town hall and move people out while it was installed. It's extremely disruptive. It's extremely costly, and based on, at least this is just, armchair analysis, but the group that did the B2Q, who is the group that did the electrification study, at least the preliminary one, it's concluded that, it is probably financially not, the payback period is, way outside the realm of what would be feasible. So with all that, we're really just here to ask the board to allow staff to move forward, because we need to have a package developed by October. Vicky, was it 14th?
The 18th, yep.
October 18th for submission for the state grant that would hopefully pay the difference between the cost of a fossil fuel replacement and electrification, which is probably in the tune between $600,000 and $800,000 would be the delta between the two. And we need to have the ARPA funds that we're going to be funding the difference that the grant doesn't pick up committed by way of a contract or an agreement, committing those funds for this project by December 31st, or we're supposed to send the funds back to the federal government. So at this point, to be perfectly candid, it is going to be extremely tight, and we really need to just move forward. I think, and Vicky pointed out earlier today, and it's really a great point, is that this project started as an in-kind replacement on fossil fuels, and there was no discussion of electrification, through the various changes, and it's now moved to, that there is a likelihood that it could be a replacement for a fossil fuel system and move to electrification. So I think, the town has certainly, I believe, done its part in due diligence and at least trying to move to a more greener alternative. And the alternative is, if we don't get the grant, right, it will have to be an in-kind replacement. And we'll be looking at some sort of electrification replacement at the end of the new system's life cycle. I don't know if you want to jump in, Vicky, and add it.
Yeah, no, that's a great summary of where we are today. It's been a long road and the project's evolved a lot from the beginning, like Steve said. So I'm happy to answer any questions about how we got here or other options we looked at or whatever other questions you all may have. But the grant that Steve's talking about is a Green Communities grant, and Wenham's been a green community since 2010. You all were one of the first communities to get the designation, and we've gotten, $1 million through Green Communities over these years. And now they're offering a $500,000 decarbonization grant for projects just like this to pay for that delta between a traditional fossil fuel in-kind replacement and an electrification project. So this really fits right into their grant opportunity. I can't say how competitive it's going to be. Hamilton applied and we're still waiting to hear. So I don't have a good feel of your chances, but it's worth going for it. And that's due October 18th.
Vicki, my question is, if we were not to receive the grant, I'm assuming, but could you clarify, is it then prohibitively expensive, essentially, for us to do electrification without the grant?
Yeah, you'd need more money. The ARPA isn't enough.
Yeah.
The ARPA was appropriated with the intent of an in-kind replacement. So you'd need more money.
Up to the tune of probably the $500,000. So we'd have to raise that through other means, whether, I think the only alternative would be a debt exclusion.
Okay, that was the question. Thank you.
Yeah. But again, then you'd be, I won't go too much into the weeds, but you can be committing to a project that you may not be able to see through the end because you'd be committing. You can't really commit to a project without the funds being appropriated, and would be committing to a project we effectively can only pay half of to a company that's going to do the work in anticipation of hoping that town meeting will, let's say there's not a way around it, but that's just, it's not super straightforward from, finance law perspective. Yeah,
Gary?
sorry.
Okay.
Is there a alternative use for the ARPA money? If, we got the deadlines here. If we do not hear back for the grant, then it's clearly not affordable for us to do the whole project without considerable increases, which we would not get to the next town meeting, which means the ARPA would expire. So is there a smaller scale HVAC fix at the ARPA level, or would we apply ARPA elsewhere?
No, you could do either or. So I mean, we still the project as originally scoped, which is just replacing essentially what we have there with a newer version on fossil fuels, is still appropriate to use ARPA funds to fund. So that could be our fallback. And and the other fallback is the board could be like, well, we really like the electrification idea. We want to spend the ARPA funds somewhere else. Obviously it's got to be an appropriate use. The board did go through that exercise of, I think we ended up having 16 or 17, not to pull it out, it's been about a year and a half now, but I think those 16 or 17 projects were able to get to the first 10. We could start moving down the list. Those are kind of the alternatives, but hopefully, we're having a different conversation at the end of the year where we've been awarded the funds and we're moving forward. But that's kind of the push. We gotta, get off the pot, so to speak, and really move, because we're really behind the 8 ball as it is right now.
And the HVAC is in relatively dire straits. Is that accurate?
Yes, right.
Other comments? So I think we're not actually on this for a vote, Steve, so do you
I think generally the
generally the
the
sense?
board is appropriate in this case. Because I have the authority to move forward with all these projects with a vote about a year ago. But I don't like to, this would be a relatively large shift from the direction. We've been trying to include the Climate Action Committee, explore all electrification options, but that's kind of cutting that short a little bit and just, moving ahead with the grant process.
Any objections to Steve moving forward as described? Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Vicky.
Yeah,
Oh, you're
thanks,
welcome.
Vicki.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate
No
it.
problem.
Appreciate it. Okay, we will go back to A, under new business, the board and committee appointments. There are some adjustments to the list that we'll be approving this evening. Steve, would you like to speak to those?
Yeah, sure. So this year's annual appointment process, I think highlights the need for, again, another formal process. Right before, when I first started, and I can't speak to how it was before, but generally there was not a lot of interest. Not to say that we have a ton of interest in our boards and committees members, but board and committees. But this year we do have a couple contested races. The other, or I should say, contested interest, and in one of them involves a seat that has an incumbent. And typically in the past, the board has just routinely, if the incumbent that's in the seat would routinely reappoint. But in this case, I believe it's on the, scrolling down.
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing.
Yeah,
Trust.
affordable housing trust. There is interest in the seats, including the incumbent. So I think the board, and to make it open and fair, I believe the board will need to entertain all interest and not make a routine reappointment. Look at all the candidates and for that reason, I think that, we should work on a policy, A, and B, move that appointment off at least one meeting cycle so that we can coordinate to get the folks on to speak to the select board and have the board maybe have a discussion as to, how we're going to handle it in the future. Because I believe that to be the most fair way. And secondly, the Conservation Commission, it has requested the board in the letter from the chair, Phil Colarusso, was in the packet, to defer the appointment to the seats on his board because he would like the opportunity for his board to interview the candidates first so that they may make a recommendation. Which is another area for clarification I believe we need, because the board started a couple years ago, I believe, started requesting a recommendation from the board, which I think is a great thing because they're closest to the work that they do. It's just, now I just feel like we need some consistency so that we can apply that consistency to all the boards and committees and make sure that all the boards and committees are making appropriate recommendations in a timely fashion, and that, everybody is getting their fair shake if they have an interest on the seat, interest in a seat on a board or committee.
Yeah, I'm in support of thinking through a policy and a time frame to go with it. And I guess I would also question whether we should refer the Affordable Housing Trust candidates to the Affordable Housing Trust and afford them the same opportunity as Phil has requested for Concom, for them to interview the candidates and decide whether they'd like to make a recommendation. I think that's also a possibility. Comments? Ben?
I agree with that, Deirdre, that we, that we see if affordable housing wants to take that same opportunity.
And I think that at least the option, I mean, something to think about as you're talking is the option to, I guess, not make a recommendation, right? I believe it should be the board to, you know, be like, yes, would like to interview the people, or if not, then you can't recommend one person and not interview everybody. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so we can kind of put that in writing so that we have a system to follow so that everybody is treated fairly in the process.
So for this round, can you request that of the Affordable Housing Trust if they are willing to or would like to interview the 3 candidates and decide whether they want to make a recommendation or not?
I can do that. It's no problem.
Anyone object? Okay, and I'm guessing we will go along with Phil's suggestion also for Concom. Any issues with that? Okay, and then Steve, one more adjustment.
Yeah, so thirdly, the ADA coordinator, Jim, our COA director, no longer wants to fill the role of the ADA coordinator. So he had requested that Patrick Hogan be his replacement. However, he would be a volunteer, and Deirdre rightfully pointed out that we have more than 50 employees here, so that we are required by state law to appoint a town representative that is an employee of the town. So we are working towards a solution to that, but do not have one for this meeting. And we'll report back to the board at a later date.
And I'd just like to thank Patrick Hogan for coming forward and being willing to serve in that capacity. And, you know, we regret that we're not able to do that based on state law, but hopefully we can engage him and his expertise in other ways. So thank you. Okay, so if there is not discussion, would someone like to make a motion? Starting with the Cemetery Commission.
I'll read.
Gary?
All right, I move to appoint Linda Smith to the Cemetery Commission for a term beginning July 1st, 2024 and ending June 30th, 2027. Are we taking individual votes or you want all read?
Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any comments?
No.
Okay, roll call. Deirdre, yes. Gary?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right.
Next
Move
is
to,
Council on Aging. Sorry, go ahead, Gary.
you want me to read them all or?
Sure, go
Okay.
ahead.
All right, move to appoint Gretchen Muchamp to the Council of Aging for a term beginning July 1st, 2024 and ending June 30th, 2027.
Second.
Discussion? Okay. Move to a vote. Deirdre, yes. Gary?
Gary, yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Excellent. Motion passes.
Okay,
Gary?
move to appoint Kristen Crockett and Peggy Roll to the Hamilton Wenham Cultural Council for a term beginning July 1st, 2024 and ending June 30th, 2027.
We have a
Second.
second? Okay. Discussion? Okay, Deirdre says yes. Gary?
Gary, yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Thank you. Gary?
All right, move to appoint Michael Reed to the Historic District Commission for a term beginning July 1st, 2024 and ending June 30th, 2027.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Okay, vote. Deirdre, yes.
Gary, yes. Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
Move to appoint Anthony DeStefano to the Wenham Housing Authority for a term beginning July 1st, 2024 and ending until the next regularly scheduled local election in April.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Okay, Deirdre, yes. Gary?
Gary, yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes. And one more.
All right, move to appoint Kristen Crockett to the Wenham Issues of Social Service Committee for a term beginning July 1st, 2024 and ending June 30th, 2027.
Second.
Okay, we'll vote. Deirdre, yes. Gary?
Yes.
Wait, I have
Oh.
a quick question. We didn't have discussion on that.
Sorry.
I just had I just had a quick question, and it's nothing for Kristen, but is there a limit to the amount of appointments that an individual can have? So there's not. And I only asked because I think Kristen is signing up for quite some quite a lot of airtime here. So which is fine. I mean, more power to her, but also, affordable housing. I mean, some of these some of them are awesome and they're great. And I love love the idea, but some of them may be a little contradictory. So I worry a little bit about that. But if there is no limit, then I guess more power to her.
I think there is no limit, and Kristen is a municipal employee in another town, so I do feel confident that she knows what she's getting herself into.
Okay, I just wanted to triple check because her name's all over this. So
It is.
I just want to make sure that from that perspective too, it's a lot of work.
Gary?
Yes, and the solution, it's not a problem, but this is still an opportunity for other people to sign up, because even with all these appointments over the last 2 months, we still have vacancies. So
yeah, I mean, my only concern too is it overextending a little bit? Like, are we leaving if she takes a 2-week vacation, are we leaving some folks in a lurch, like across the board here? Because I think she's on 5 appointments. So
She's on 3 actually, and I know I'm not certain about all of them, but I'm pretty sure Cultural Council only meets once a year. I believe that's correct.
Oh, okay.
Gary, do you know that?
yes, unless something special comes up, and really, otherwise it's just going to be a vacancy, which is a even bigger problem. So
Yeah, more power to her. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that it was okay. Okay.
I think they're not all of
Or-
the same frequency is my point. I believe Cultural Council is once a year and Wish is not terribly frequent, I believe. But I think she knows what she's getting into.
Great.
Okay, I'm just going to retake the vote. So once again, this is on the move to appoint Kristen Crockett to Wish. Correct? Yes. It was moved and seconded. Deirdre votes yes. Gary?
yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Appointments are completed. We will move to C on the agenda. Margaret Hoffman is here to present the finalized master plan as approved by the planning board. Very exciting. Is Margaret a panelist?
No.
Unless she might be under, she's under Town of Wenham, I think. Michelle, let me just promote her. I believe that's her. Are you here, Margaret?
I am, yes.
There she is.
Took me a
Hi,
minute.
Margaret.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. So most of you know, we've been through this 2-year process, 2 years plus, I think, actually, of creating the town's master plan. It's finally done, and it didn't occur to me, we probably should have had a cake or something tonight, So anyone who has cake at your house, go get it, eat it now. So the Master Plan Advisory Committee did a wonderful job, and Deirdre, thank you as vice chair. Joanne Frisella was the chair of that committee. She did an amazing job, and the planning board also put in a lot of hard work and effort into this. The planning board did vote to adopt the master plan as they made a couple of small edits after the last draft, but they finally did adopt it. And as far as Mass General Law goes, that's pretty much all that has to be done. The planning board adopts it and then would send it to the state. But as you know, we wanted the select board to also have a chance to officially adopt this master plan. There's a lot that's going to be done in this plan. There's a lot of recommendations. I'm assuming you've all seen it. You've had an opportunity to look through it and, you know, get a good sense of what's to come over the next years, the next 10 years. So this is a 10-year master plan. But I did want to officially present it to you. And I'm sorry, I don't know if any of the other board members are here. Michelle, are there any planning board members or master plan committee members? It's hard for me to tell. Anyway, if they're here, I want to thank them also for all the hard work that they did over the past couple of years. So the next steps, I guess, would be for the select board. You can officially vote if you'd like to, and just to adopt this master plan. And then that will give us the confidence we need to go ahead and present it to the state, which is part of Mass General Law, to send it to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, which used to be DHCD. So, yeah, but if anyone has questions about it or about the process or what you've seen in it, there are two parts. There's the master plan, which gives you all of the, you know, there's lots of great pictures and wonderful information about the community and what work we went through to get to these ideas. And then there's the actual action plan, which gives actionable items to be done over the next 10 years and responsible parties. This action plan is something that the community will continue to work through, depending on, well, Steve's office, and the select board. I believe the select board will have a great part in this over the next years too, especially anything that has to do with financing. So, but yeah, I'm sorry, here is the copy of the master. This is the action plan. So you can see we had lots of great pictures. A lot of work was done. There were the 5 core themes. And then each theme has a list of action items to go along with it and to achieve those goals. So I don't know if anyone has questions or comments.
Yeah, just before any question, I just want the board to know that they don't have to accept it tonight, right? This is an opportunity to ask any questions, request more information, you know, ask for an opportunity to review it further. You know, and also land use has been working hard to develop, you know, an implementation plan.
Mhm.
So that, you know, that is coming. This is really just the planning board has gone through this process. They've, you know, arrived at this master plan and are, you know, delivering it to the select board, and the select board, you know, essentially needs to adopt it or accept it as written so that we can start implementing the things that are found in this document.
And I'll open up for discussion in just a second, but I wanted to echo what Margaret said in terms of thanking the Master Plan Advisory Committee. It was a great group who worked very hard and very thoughtfully. It was a pleasure to serve with this group of people. I also want to thank Margaret Hoffman, who put an incredible amount of work into this as well. Could not have done it without you, Margaret, as well as Kate Mallory and Land Use Office.
For sure. And Michelle.
And Michelle. It was a team effort for sure.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
So I'd like to see if the board have questions or comments on the plan. Gary?
Yeah, so my thank you to all involved as well. And I think we had significant public participation in this whole process, but I would encourage people to understand that this 10-year plan is going to need more citizen involvement, either through committees or through volunteering as well. I also would recommend this final document is up on the website too, correct?
Yes, yes, it
Yeah.
is.
So citizens ought to review it in detail, read through it, and see where we're going to go over the next 10 years.
Great. Thank you, Gary. Good point.
Ben?
I also just want to add my thanks and appreciation to everyone who spent so much time enabling us to get to this place, in participating in just some, portions of the process along the way, and then in reading the final documents. I've been struck at how thoughtful and nuanced a plan this is, that really tries to strike a balance between a number of different objectives that, through the information gathering and sort of solicitation of input phases, came to the fore as important objectives and principles that citizens and town officials and town staff had for the next 10 years for Wenham. So I think it's really done a great job in trying to, strike the right balances between those various equities. And I'm certainly prepared tonight, if the rest of the board is, to accept and approve the master plan as presented.
Karen, would you like to comment?
No, I'm purely just echoing the rest of the boards. Thank you to everybody for their participation. It's been a long time coming, and I'm extremely pleased of the work that has been put into this, as well as the final outcome. So I'm prepared to vote as well.
Great. Thank you, everyone. If that's all the comments, then I will entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. Can we throw up the front page? So I move to for the select board to accept and approve the Wenham action plan from the master plan dated May 20th, 2024.
Second.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, this is the action plan.
Yep.
We wanted to just adopt the master plan. So
All right,
if
so
you make a motion to
amend the
master.
motion to strike action and insert master.
Second.
Then, yeah.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. Deirdre, yes. Gary?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Thank you. Congratulations. Motion passed. And
Great.
we have fully approved master plan.
Yay. Thank you all so
Yay.
much. Great.
Thank you, Margaret.
Congratulations to all of you too.
We should have cake.
We
Yes.
should have cake.
Any reason for cake.
Okay, next up on the agenda is item E, the internal account transfer request to be presented by our finance director, Jeff Soulard, and our town administrator, Steve Poulos. Jeff, am I handing it to you?
I can, before
Oh,
Jeff
Steve?
goes into the details, I'll just, the board's aware, this is, we did not post this for a vote. However, we do need a vote. So I think the board will have to take a vote on this. These are relatively routine, the reasons change, but it is routine that at the end of the year, when our accountant is closing the books, we need to do these internal account transfers to essentially zero out or create a positive balance in any overspent accounts. So generally what we do is we transfer funds from accounts that have surplus and move it into accounts that are in a deficit. Usually it's not a written policy, or but generally in Wenham's history, we'd have the finance committee review and approve these before the select board sees them. It needs both. The approval is contingent on both both boards approving the transfers. However, the FinCom was unable to get a quorum at their last meeting when they were going to review this. So it is coming to the select board first in this case. Time is, it's not a super rush, but it is somewhat of the essence here because, Jeff is, working hard to get the books closed, and we really can't move forward until we have the authorization to make these transfers. And then I'll let Jeff fill in anything I missed and kind of walk through a little bit of the granular details and the reasons for the need to transfer funds.
Great, thanks, Steve. So up on the screen now is a revised list. We sent a list around yesterday, but we are actually today processing the last payroll and the last vendor payments for FY24. So the list yesterday contained a lot of estimates. Now we have more actual numbers. So this list has been trimmed down a little, and it's also the dollar value of what we're moving around has been reduced quite a bit as well. Just to sort of follow on with what Steve was talking about, just to give people a kind of refresher course on how the budget works. Wenham passes essentially a wage and expense budget. We don't have the town vote on a line item budget. So at the end of the year, what we need to do in most cases is make sure that no wage item or no expense item for any given department is in a negative balance. Sub accounts underneath that can be negative. So for example, if, let's just take police, if the police regular wages had a positive balance, but police overtime wages had a negative balance, as long as those net to more than zero, there's no need for a transfer. What we're doing here tonight is under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 33B, which allows towns essentially in May and June and for the first 2 weeks of July to make transfers between wages and expenses, which is not allowed in other times of the year, and also to make transfers between different departments, which is also not allowed during the year. So what we have here is sort of 13 groups of transfers. And so what I will try to do is walk through and just kind of give you some of the rationale behind why some of these accounts might be over. As Steve mentioned, under 33B, they allow you this special ability to move money between wages and expenses or departments, but to do that, they require that both the select board and the finance committee sign off on those transfers, which is why we have this sort of two-part setup that Steve was mentioning. We need to move $7,230 into the selectmen salary and wages line. This one's pretty simple. We've got 2 additional select board members in FY24. Wasn't in the original budget. So we are taking money from the $20,000 town hall salary reserve line to handle that overage. The second one on the list, small transfer, about $500 to fill up the assessor contract services line. That line has gone over for this year for a couple of reasons. One, we migrated the Patriot software from our local server over to the cloud servers in Danvers. So some extra costs were incurred for that. And also it was a full revaluation year for the town, and Patriot provides the software, but they also provide some consulting services to help us doing the valuations in town. So there's a little extra work this year, and that led to the contract services line being over for FY24. The next one, $4,300 in finance contract services. This one sort of makes sense. We paid Markham LLP, an accounting firm, to provide a professional to man the finance director position while the town was searching for that replacement. So as you can see, there wasn't a finance director being paid, so the finance salary and wages has a surplus. We're using that money to pay for the consultant that was essentially covering, the finance director position during that time. Next one down here, it covers kind of the town hall budget. So we've got, town hall gas and electric, we're higher than budgeted. And we are moving $1,050 and $4,600 there from what was set aside as a town hall / utility reserve back in FY24. Steve can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the town elected to not adjust every single budget for utilities and instead to hold $100,000 sort of at the town level to be available to help any department that incurred extra costs in the utility space. So there's a transfer for those two. Then there's a couple of smaller ones. Town hall postage, we need about $1,600 there. And then there's about $1,500 in town hall miscellaneous. Frankly, I can't speak too much to that 1,500 that falls under miscellaneous, but I would say that the postage budget is probably a little insufficient and is something we need to look at moving forward. Michelle might actually be able to weigh in on that a bit more. And we had some additional money available in town hall salaries and wages that we're going to use to fund the postage and the miscellaneous expenses there. Next one on the list, we need about $1,500 to fund the town clerk salary and wages line. We ended up needing some additional coverage, I think back in January, February, or maybe February, March, in the town clerk's office. And so, we had to staff the office during that time, and we're just simply, again, reaching into that $20,000 salary reserve line to help us, cover that additional need that we weren't aware of, at the beginning of the year. Next one is permitting, kind of the building inspector department there. In total, we're over in the expenses there by about $1,900. In speaking with the building inspector, I think this issue really arises from the fact that it sounds like maybe his actual budget request hasn't sort of filtered up into the actual budget for the last couple of years. And so he's run into these shortfalls, which, it looks like we just hadn't, put in the extra couple of $1,000s into that budget. That has been addressed for the FY25 budget. We did ensure that he has the requested budget amount in the budget that was approved for FY25. The next one is sort of, it will seem kind of silly, but I mentioned earlier that we do wage and expense budgets, but in some areas we get into a little bit more detail where residents vote on the budget. And the school budgets is one area where we break out an expense line item for the operating budgets of the schools and also the debt budgets for the schools. And so what we're looking at here for $5,207 is a transfer that needs to be made from the operating assessment to the debt assessment. When we prepared the FY24 budget, we probably did not have exact allocations from the Essex Tech District. The total was sufficient, but the breakdown between debt and operations was a little bit off. So this is just kind of a housekeeping transfer to sort of even that out. Next one here, street lighting. It's over about $5,600 for the year. As you would imagine, is largely driven by utility costs there. So we will be dipping into the utility reserve there to fund the additional costs in the street lighting budget. Next one, refuse collection, the trash collection. This one is over just about $13,000. Steve might be able to speak to this a little bit more. But that's largely driven by increasing costs, in the trash collection space for us. And we've elected to use the funds available under the town hall utility reserve to help us sort of balance out the trash budget there. Next one is not general fund. This is the water department, which is a different fund, which is largely funded by user fees. We're looking to move $12,000 from the salary and wages line into the just general water expense line. And I would say this is largely driven by the fact that there's a couple of things, expenses that are incurred in the general fund. There are employee benefits, health insurance, dental insurance, that type of thing, that are charged to those, or the town pays for employees that work in the water department. And so at the end of every year, we go through and look at what those costs were, and we move those expenses from the general fund, which is tax driven, and move those expenses into the water fund. And then we also have what are called indirect expenses, which, Mass General law allows us to take some expenses that are incurred at the general fund level for things like town administration, finance, and allocate some portion of those to a fund that is largely user fee driven. And so we do that for my finance department, and then the town administrator group with Joe and Michelle and Steve. And so in total, those came to about $120,000 or so. And I think we had only budgeted, a little over 100. So that's why you're seeing a $12,000 difference there. And I know Eric has been working with sort of like a man down or half a man down in the water department for a while. So there are some funds available in the salary and wages line. Next one is just the Council on Aging. We're moving about $890 worth of excess salary and wages to apply against $585 of miscellaneous expenses, typically sort of programming and that type of thing. And then also $305 of some expenses that were allocated to the Council on Aging van account. Just kind of a small housekeeping thing there. Last one on this page, another utility. Library, needs about $9,000 to balance out the various, heat and electric utility charges at the library, and we'll tap into the utility reserve to help offset that. And if I switch to the next page, there's another charge here in the library. There was about $3,000 of HVAC expenses that were booked to a library capital. It's kind of a repair and capital for the library. I know there is a bigger FY24 capital project approved. I think that hasn't gotten started yet. And this was some expenses that were incurred earlier in the year, were charged to this account. They weren't really part of the larger capital project. And so we're just taking some excess salary funds and using them to offset this capital charge in the operating budget. And it should be noted that, the library is a joint effort, and, we bill Hamilton, we run the library, and then bill Hamilton for their share. And so, this $3,000 cost is, being absorbed, more than half by Hamilton in the invoice that we just sent them for the final bill for FY24. This final section here is debt. And this is largely just moving money between principal and interest. You will see in the middle there's a charge for $1 and a charge for $13. When we did the estimates for FY24 debt, it looks like we must have come in just a little bit short, about $14 short in total. So we're moving some money left over in our municipal audit expense line to help offset that. But if we walk through these, you'll see we're moving $2,313 from, principal payment to interest payment, 15,000 or so from principal to interest, and then there's 1,800 and 2,000 down below there on the various debts. And if you think about this, so it sort of makes sense. So the way our debt is structured is that all of this debt you're looking at here are in what we call State House notes, which are forms of debt that are run through the Department of Revenue. It's short-term debt that you just sort of you pay it off in full, but then they reissue you short-term debt each year. And so what you'll have is have $100,000 that you'll owe on a note. And what you'll do is you'll pay $100,000 to pay it off. And you might say, now we want to take out 80,000, roll that into the next year in new debt. And so essentially what you've done is pay off $20,000 of principal. What happened last year is, when we make the budget, we don't have final numbers on all of these things. And so, we're making estimates. And if you think of where we've been over the last, 12 to 18 months, we're in a rising interest rate environment. And so my assumption is that when we, made these estimates were made last year, the debt estimate was too low as rates were rising. And so therefore we had to pay less principal and pay more interest, but the town only authorized us to pay a certain amount of debt. So when we made the pay, when we redid the debt in April and May, we had to pay down less than we had anticipated because the debt service, the interest on the debt service was higher than anticipated. So we didn't pay any more than the residents authorized. We just had to shift and pay more debt than we had anticipated. The downside of that is our interest cost is higher, and we didn't pay down as much principal as we had hoped for. So that's sort of what drove that last kind of $21,765 worth of transfers there. So in total, just under $95,000, went from one account, from the transfer from accounts to the transfer to accounts. It should be pointed out, none of these are increases to the overall budget. These are just moving approved budgets around to, deal with where we had some surpluses that we could use to fund some deficiencies in certain line items. I know I've rambled on quickly here about a bunch of different things, so I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have on these.
Okay, just a clarification. So we do need to vote on this evening, as I understand it, because we are up against closing the books for the fiscal year, correct?
Yes, and I believe Steve and I had talked about, maybe this is something that has happened here in the past in Wenham, is that I believe the select board could vote to approve these transfers contingent upon finance committee approval. Therefore, if for some reason the finance committee didn't support one of these, that would not have your approval either. So that I thought that made some sense when Steve mentioned that.
Okay. Do we have questions from the board? Gary?
I've just echo what Jeff said, that our budget process worked very well here when you consider that we had very small changes required, less than 1% of the budget here. And the second point I'd make is the use of the utility reserve. That's a new line that we developed, right, Jeff? And certainly has come in quite handy here to plan for contingencies such as that.
Yeah, and I think one of the nice things about doing it that way, and Steve can speak to whether if this was the idea or not, but if you were to increase each one of the individual budgets, you have a little less control, because now 7 or 8 departments have bigger budgets that tend to not get smaller as the years go by. So this gave you a little more control over where that money was, and the hope being that maybe this was a somewhat short-term thing we would be facing, and therefore it's a little easier to just shrink that reserve moving forward, rather than saying to a bunch of different departments, hey, we're trimming your budget back. Typically departments will find a way to use those funds if they can. So I think as you say, it worked as intended, and I think it was probably a smart way to approach this from the town's perspective last year.
That was exactly the intent, Jeff.
Great. Ben or Karen, anything to add or comment or question?
No.
Nope.
Okay.
Happy to make the motion.
Sure.
I move to approve the internal account transfer request presented by the finance director and the town administrator, conditioned upon the subsequent approval of the finance committee.
Second.
Great. Any further discussion? Okay, let's vote. Deirdre, yes. Gary?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Great. Motion passes. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
Okay, my apologies. I forgot to mention, we moved past item B on the agenda, which is the fire department promotion and badge pinning, because we are on Zoom this evening. That has been postponed so that they can actually have the full in-person experience and invite their families and so forth. So that will reappear at a later meeting. Okay, next we have item G, our town administrator, to provide us an update on the town clerk search. Steve?
Yep, so as the board's aware, we posted the job opening about 3 weeks, probably about a month ago now. And we've had 10 interested individuals. We are interviewing them this week. And we will be meeting as the panel, the interview panel. I know there was some talk back and forth about whether to include select board members part of a working group in the first preliminary, but I opted not to, and to make this more of a staff recommendation to the board for a list of finalists out of the 10 interested individuals for the board to interview in a public meeting. So we will be wrapping up these interviews on Wednesday, and we'll be sitting as a group, hopefully coming up with a determination either Wednesday or Thursday to reduce the group from 10 to 3 or 4. And those individuals will be notified of their, they're moving to the finalist group for a second interview by the 16th of July. This will give them a couple days to, discuss with their partners, family members, friends, whether they'd like to proceed with the process, because the next process will be a public interview set to occur at the select board's meeting on the 23rd. Their names will have to be posted in a public forum, so our website, and on the 18th to comply with open meeting law. And they will be interviewed in public on Tuesday. We believe Tuesday will likely be a relatively long and drawn out meeting, because there will be some other business that we'll likely have to attend. However, we are going to try to keep it light with the other business. And I'd like to ask the board how they would like to proceed, if they would like to maybe set up a deliberation only meeting on the Thursday or Wednesday in anticipation. If you would like to do your deliberation on Tuesday, we would like to try to notify the candidates. Karen?
Hi, I'm sorry. You're just throwing off like Tuesdays and Wednesdays. The
Oh,
term.
sorry.
Can you just
Yeah,
give the
it's
date,
Tuesday.
because I'm all over the
Sorry, so
place.
Tuesday so Tuesday the 23rd, sorry, is this when we're set to interview. The select board is set to interview the finalist candidates on the 23rd, which is a Tuesday. It was likely be a long meeting, so I'm asking the select board what their preference is. Would they like to look at setting up another meeting for deliberation and selection of the candidates to give you time to reflect on your notes, either Wednesday or Thursday, so that would be the 24th or 25th, or is the board's preference to interview the candidates and then move to a deliberation on the 23rd, which is Tuesday? I believe it's important that we move this process relatively quickly, because we want to have the individual start by, right around the first week of September, either the last week of August, first week of September, second week of September. So we have some overlap. So I think we're in a good place that if the select board made its decision on the week of the 23rd, at some point, we could notify the individual by Monday or Tuesday, the 29th or 30th of July. And that gives them a month to notify their employer and make any arrangements to start with the town of Wenham by the first week of September, which would then allow for 2-week overlap if necessary with the town clerk, the currently temporary appointed town clerk. clerk.
Thoughts? Gary?
Quick question first. When will we receive resume packages prior to the interviews?
You'll receive. So well, that's a good question. So you'll either receive the packets. I'm just trying to think if we release the names in the public forum through email, I guess they become a publicly requested record out of the personnel domain. However, if they're notified on the 16th that they're being requested to move into the finalist group and they accept, we could send you the packets on the 18th prior to the agenda being posted, because it would be in the public domain anyways. I'm just trying to think in the, out of respect for the individual's privacy. If they choose not to move forward with the process due to privacy concerns, not wanting to be posted in public, I'm hesitant to release the information through email before that. So is the 18th acceptable to the board for the 23rd, or would you prefer something sooner?
It looks like the 18th, as far as I'm concerned, works because that's your deadline for posting the agenda for the meeting anyhow,
That's
right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it gives us the full weekend to read the resumes and perhaps develop some good questions for Tuesday, the 23rd.
Yeah, I think the confidentiality aspect is very important, so we need to respect that part of the process. But that raises another question about questions and how do we formulate questions for the interview, given the OML constraints. Steve?
I think that maybe a good way to go about that is to send, if each member could send me maybe 3 or 4 questions, identifying 2 of the questions as their primary questions and 1 or 2 of the questions as backup questions. I could then work to compile a list of 10 questions, using 2 primaries. Well, try to use the 2 primaries from each board member. However, if there's a redundant question asking essentially the same thing, I could pull from a backup question. And then the questions could be asked in a random order. The board could select its order at the beginning of the meeting, and either change the order of the questions to match with the individuals who are interested in asking the question, or just go 1 through 10 and just rotate through the list. So rotate through the members equally through the 10 questions.
That's essentially how we did it on the previous town administrator selection board. Though I think each of the board members at the end of the 10 had the opportunity for one more individual question or follow-up, but that's just becomes a matter of how much time you want to spend.
Yeah. And I think just they want to remember if that's the way, I'm fine with that. But if that's the way you want to make sure, if you don't ask it to the first candidate, you really can't ask it to the second candidate unless it's, you want to ask the same questions to everybody unless you can logically get there through discussion and, something like a follow-up from something that they specifically said in their answers.
Schedule-wise too, I just point out, I think you have a major planning board meeting on the 24th.
I'm not aware.
I think that's what the 3A discussion meeting within the board.
Within the board, but there's not a public hearing,
Yeah,
correct?
not a public hearing, no.
That could occupy Peter.
Yes. I mean, my preference would be to have some time between the interviews, even if it's a day or preferably, I guess, 2 days, maybe for the Thursday. If we can do it so that we can deliberate on what we've heard in the interviews, but also so that the public has an opportunity to see the interviews and to submit comments and recommendations if they choose to.
And then there's no other comments. Finally, does the board want to start at its normal 6:30 time or look to start earlier on the 23rd?
How long for each interview? Sorry, did you say 30 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, that depends on how it's tough. And we've been finding that we have 10 questions in the panel we're doing with 6 folks, and the interviews are ranging from about 30 minutes to about 50 minutes, depending on how talkative the person being interviewed is, and any thing they say that promote any sort of follow-ups or further questioning.
And you anticipate a light agenda other than the interviews? Or
Yeah, that
will
is
you-
the goal. Yeah.
We do
Karen,
have
those are hands
Oh,
raised.
sorry. Karen, go ahead, and then Joe.
I was just gonna look from a scheduling perspective. Ben, if you can make the 23rd work, I can actually start at 5:30.
Yeah, I can start at 5:30 or even earlier if that's what we need to do to comfortably fit in each of the interviews plus whatever other business we have.
So that's the 25th, right? Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
I would note that there's we're gonna have
23rd.
Right, sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
I just wanted to make note that we had planned originally to have a National Grid hearing that day as well. Notices have been sent out to abutters. However, I believe we can have the meeting be at a subsequent date. We wouldn't have to set out another notification. But that originally we had National Grid set to meet that night. Now we could also have them rearrange the time. I think originally it was for 6:15 or so. So that's just something to take note of, but we can discuss other options as well.
Yeah, we'll work to move that. The hearing. We'll move the hearing.
So to clarify, we're talking about the Tuesday, July 23rd meeting, potentially starting at 5:30 with a follow-up meeting on the Thursday evening for final votes, final deliberations and a vote.
That's my understanding.
Any chance we could make the 25th virtual?
Seems like we could. Steve, any problem with that?
No problem on our end. That's the board's preference.
Okay, so
I can
interviews
make,
in
yeah, I
person,
can make that work. So
interviews in person and final deliberations on Zoom. 6:30 for the 25th on Thursday. Is that the preference?
Works for me.
Sounds
Uh,
good.
hold on one second. Let me triple check something.
Good.
The 25th, I can start at any time. So if you wanted to do it early, we could start at like, 3 or 4. You want to do it earlier?
I don't think I could do it until 6 p.m. on the Thursday myself.
Okay, 6 p.m. on Thursday. Steve, you'll have to check these with Peter.
Yep. And then the one more final question, something we've run into in this interview process is scheduling conflicts and life events that arise in a request to have it remote. So in the event that an individual is scheduled to be here in person and they ask to have it changed to remote, does the board still want to entertain interviewing? Does it, do you want to move forward with an interview in a remote capacity, or to consider it that, this is when the interview is, and if you can't make it, then, unfortunately, there are other candidates.
So to allow the candidates to appear by Zoom, is that the
Yes,
question?
yes.
Hmm.
I'm just
Is that-
anticipating it's gonna happen. And I want to have an answer, because our next meeting will be the interviews.
Strong feelings on that?
And I think the ideal is that they're in person, and that's what we're pushing for. But if something was to come up, would that conflict, remove them from the process in the board's eyes?
Ben?
I think as long as this would pass legal muster, which I think it would, but it may be worth checking with KP Law, that we say that in person is preferred, and that preference would be part of the evaluation criteria. The only reason I say that is I wouldn't necessarily want to knock someone out of the process if they weren't able to be there in person. Because, it may be some emergency, some legitimate excuse, but I recognize we have to have sort of one uniform rule. So we can't take it case by case. So I would say that it be stated that it's the strong preference is that it be in person, and that would be one of the evaluative criteria. So, everyone will come in person unless they absolutely can't. And if they can't, it may affect how the person is evaluated, but they wouldn't be disqualified. I don't know if others think that's a good compromise.
I'd agree with that standpoint. And I guess a question, what happens during the actual interview evening? Can we request that the candidates are in another room and come in for their interviews? Or given that it's a public meeting, can everyone sit and hear everyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I can get clarification on that. I think you can make the request, however, you can't
Force it?
force it. You could maybe make a request out of respect to the other candidates, would ask you, but you certainly can't. It's a public meeting. I mean, you certainly can't prevent anybody from attending and listening.
So I guess we'd request that they each have their own time without other candidates. But
Yeah, and I'll get clarity on that and make sure, because it's a different environment now from the last time we did public interviews.
yeah, that would be great. And you would like questions, our preferred questions from us by when?
So, sooner the better, but like next Tuesday or something, if that's okay with the board, then that gives a couple days to get them together and get them out with the packet on. Just as I'm saying that, probably we'll distribute them at the meeting, beginning of the meeting, give the board a chance to go through and review them.
Yes. Okay, anyone have any other comments or questions? Steve, you have what you need?
I believe I do. Thank you.
Okay, agenda item H is a bit of a mouthful. So it seems to me, I'm gonna let Steve explain it, but appears to be a request for the select board to request the finance director to develop assumptions and review it with the FinCom to help guide us, the select board, in drafting the budget message for FY26. So Steve, would you like to clarify that a bit more?
Yeah, so this is an attempt to include, I know the board has expressed interest in including other boards and committees in the decision-making process. So historically, the budget message is the select boards and will likely remain to be. The budget message is what goes out to boards, committee members, department heads, what the select board is looking for in their budget. Are they looking for a reduction in costs, increase in costs? What sort of COLAs are we looking at? Level funded, level service, all those variables. So this, I feel like we could bring the finance committee. It's a good opportunity, particularly with 3 new members, to bring the finance committee in to work with the finance director in creating a revenue and expenditure model. It will do a couple things. I think it will help the new members understand the the limited revenue sources that we have in Massachusetts for our local governments. It'll help them understand some of our fixed costs and budgetary pressures that are outside of our control, as well as just the general components and makeup of our expenditures being mostly salaries and service delivery type business, and then allow them to comment and critique it to a level that they're comfortable with, and then bring it back to the select board as a model that can help guide your development of the budget message, and particularly with the 3 collective bargaining agreements that we're currently in negotiations for, and any other assumptions that we have moving into the FY26 budget process.
Okay, so you're again looking for our assent, basically, and
Yeah, and how about draft to make it official? I'll just draft a quick message to the new finance committee and Jeff, saying, that the select board's looking to have this developed, and for the, the finance committee to comment on it. Maybe they want us to review some of our permit fees, or, something like that. Just, get them involved in the process and some early stages of the planning, something that we normally would do internally at this time of the year. We'll bring the finance committee in.
any discussion from the board? Nope. Gary, did
I
you?
just say that we got great talent now on the finance committee, as we've had in the last couple of years. So let's use them and get them involved in the process early.
Okay. I think we're good. Steve, you're all set?
Yep, good, thank you.
Okay, we'll move now to old business. Item I, we have continued discussion on our goals and objectives that we have been working through for the last few meetings. So this is our spreadsheet, if everyone had
Are you able to bring that up?
Yeah.
Thank you.
chance to look. So we're moving through the categories. I think tonight and it's great that Jeff Large is here, but to talk about the finance and budgeting category and perhaps the IT. So again, we're
Can you
looking
zoom in a
at
little on that?
prioritizing for this year. And I guess one distinction I wanted to just make sure is correct, Steve and Jeff. The budgetary software that we've now budgeted and will be purchased is the external facing budget software, correct? But the internal accounting system that the town uses is still a need. And I believe that that's what number 1 is on this list. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, that's correct. And just a clarification, the budget software is public facing, but also has a back end component. So the accounting software is a standalone item, and always has been. It's just a purely chart of accounts. Jeff can probably go into more detail, but it's usually we extract what's in the accounting software and do it on the back of napkins and Excel. But you know, this tool will be certainly light years ahead of that, and certainly be able to bring it to the public.
Jeff,
Can you see this goals worksheet?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's pretty small, but you can see it.
Just
If you go to view,
yeah,
Jeff?
it's just open another screen for some reason.
I think Zoom. There you go. That's good. Yeah, I mean, the finance, I'll let Jeff, if he wants to shed a little light on that, but he just went through a software transition in Essex and would be looking at probably a similar line of product as that Munis, which would probably be the Cadillac, at least in the municipal space here in Massachusetts, is extremely costly. And I think we've talked about this before. I'm not necessarily sure it justifies, well, maybe not complicated enough to justify the cost. I could be swayed otherwise.
sorry, that's the accounting software you're talking about, Munis.
Yeah,
This
which is the,
accounting
you know, that's a
software.
need because we're at the end of, the accounting software we use is called SoftWrite. It is no longer supported by the company that made it. So there's no changes, there's no updates. You know, you're locked in as is. They don't fix any bugs. They just kind of just got to make it work. So we're fine right now, but this is certainly something that needs to be part of the discussion in the next couple of years, I would think.
And needs to be budgeted for.
Yes.
And Steve,
Yeah.
just to weigh in, so we did speak with SoftWrite, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago or so. As you say, it's not being supported or improved upon, but it does functionally work. And it does the chart of account work and everything that we needed to do. We are in the process right now of moving that software from a local server over at the police station to the Danvers cloud platform, which is where we moved the Patriot Assessor software last year. We're hopeful that is going to improve the usability of the software. Today is a Tuesday, and we do vendor payments and payroll and all kinds of things, and all the various departments are putting their bills into the system, and it gets really bogged down. But I think that is actually more of a function of our 12-year-old server than it is of SoftWrite itself. So we're hopeful that maybe the performance with SoftWrite will improve fairly dramatically with the move to the Danvers cloud. We did actually just switch in Essex, as Steve mentioned, to a product called Vadar, which is really kind of the other accounting software that is at the SoftWrite price point. They're both pretty similar. They have different pros and cons. The one but it appears that Wenham used Vadar maybe 7 or 8 years ago. They actually switched from that to SoftWrite. So I'd have to look back and see why we made that switch at the time. But as Steve mentions, the switch to Munis, from what I've heard, just the conversion of the system could easily be $100,000 as a one-time investment, and then the software would go from being $18,000 to $20,000 a year to being probably $40,000 to $50,000 a year. So it would be a significant change for us. So the hope is, as much as I wouldn't say any of us within finance or other departments love SoftWrite, I don't know that the cost to make the change, it really could be justified to move to something like a Munis. I have had discussions with another local accountant about a different accounting software program that we might join up and sort of work together to maybe get them to customize for Mass Municipal. And so that might be another avenue that might be available to us down the road. But that's kind of the status of where we are now with the accounting package itself. So SoftWrite gave us no indication that it sounds like for sure there's a couple of years left anyway. So it's not probably a 26 or 27 budget item, but it is something we'll have to deal with at some point. And certainly if the performance doesn't improve with the switch to Danvers, then that that might expedite the need to move. And just real quickly, the ClearGov, the budgeting software, we have already begun implementing and sending them data and getting data into that system. We don't actually take ownership of that software until August 1st, but the hope is we are well on track to have that public facing budget software up and running by the time we get to November and start to roll the budget out. And as Steve said, it's not just external facing, it does have some internal uses as well, but I think primarily folks wanted us to get that to improve how the budget was communicated to the residents, and I think we're on track to have that ready to go for the upcoming budget season.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like that should be held for now.
Yeah, I think it should stay on the list, but maybe drop in priority.
Drop in priority.
I mean, you want to be ready to make a move because you kind of stuff like that. You don't want something to go wrong and then be trying to replace it. You kind of want to anticipate and be a little bit ahead of the game. But it sounds like we have some time, but I think it should stay on the list because it needs to stay relevant.
The next three items are ongoing in any case, right?
Yep.
And then some of these, again, I can't remember necessarily what we were thinking last year, but is the opt-out insurance analysis still an issue?
Well, so that's a cost saving measure that, I still think that it's something we need to dedicate some capacity to look into, but it is, it is time consuming. It's a relatively heavy lift to look at restructuring our insurance to include a high deductible plan, and then also to create an opt-out incentive. So that is, you basically pay people to not join your health care. So some of the communities are going to, I don't even know if they give $1,000 if you're eligible for a plan in Wenham, but you go with your spouse or partner or whatever, you get $1,000 a year that you stay off the plan, because us paying $1,000 is a lot cheaper than paying $18,000 with you on the plan. That's kind of that's the logic to that. So at the end can equate to savings, and they could be quite substantial depending on how many people decide to opt out and take the payment, because healthcare is one of our larger fixed costs that is growing at a rate far exceeding our revenue growth.
And
Yeah,
that
but
would
it
be-
would certainly be a multi-year rollout. It's a lot of research and working with the insurance consultants or salesmen to come up with packages and dealing with the unions and making sure you can get it there. And then, it's certainly a risk because you're working with assumptions that a certain amount of people are going to opt into it. And then there's saving sharing. And when you initially implement it, the first year or two, any savings the town receives by doing something like this, you have to share with the rest of the employees. So it's at the face, it sounds relatively simple, but I just want to stress that there's a lot of work there. But it could be a cost savings for the town.
And if you could clarify what economic development new growth, I don't recall what that stood for either.
Yeah, it was if I remember right, Peter's not here, but it was partly tied to the iron rail and pharmaceutical R&D development type space in the background, but then we generalized it to economic development because, you know, we need economic development and growth all over town, smart economic growth. And the master plan has covered that well. So I think that could be rolled into, you know, one of the other categories where the master plan implementation is going to show up.
Okay. And the DLS review we have in the above category, and then permitting fees and market study.
Yeah, I think that should move up. That's, in my opinion, not a huge lift. That, you know, some coordination and, you know, obviously it takes some time, but I think that's something we need to do. It's also part of the new financial policies that were distributed a couple weeks ago. This is something that we're going to be doing with some, you know, relatively routinely going forward. So we might as well start this year. And I don't think we've benchmarked ourselves against other communities for our permitting and fees in quite some time. And it's certainly a good practice to do so.
You would recommend prioritizing that one?
Yeah, I do think we should bump that up. I think it's something that would do anyways this year, so I might as well make it a goal.
Okay, so at a minimum, we have the budgetary software transition to ClearGov, continuing updating of the financial policies, the trash collection study, and the benchmarking the fees and market study. Do people want to advocate for other things?
So is there,
Sorry, go ahead, Gary.
the question was, Steve, is there any available staff time available to take a look at the inventorying the grant awards and such, or opportunities?
I mean, I think we're doing that. I believe we're going to start that new grant policy. We're going to start reporting annually the revenue and projects tied to that. Is that what you're referencing, Gary?
Yes, and I would think the first step is, you know, just a poll of the different departments to see what grants we're currently working on, and then roll it into the budget as we, I think, previously approved, right?
Yeah, I think that's certainly doable. I think
Right.
would be 90% of the way there. Anyways, again, I think that's also part of the financial policies and the grant policy.
Yep.
So it's all good stuff.
Other comments on the financial section, or are we comfortable where we are?
I'm comfortable.
I'm comfortable with the goals aspects. Steve, I'd really like to have this filled in a lot more as far as our notes. We're still missing an action item or action date.
Yes.
So
Right,
I
so-
know that we're going through them line by line on a regular basis, but it would really be from a best practices perspective, have this written out, and if it's an ongoing working document, to be able to say exactly where we are instead of having to go through line by line. We can easily have this updated. And unfortunately, I think what's ending up happening, and it's happened the last 3 meetings, is that we're picking a line item and saying, we don't remember what this is, or, you know, Peter was doing this. And we're falling, some of the action items are falling through the cracks a little bit. And I just want to try to avoid that. If there's a way that we could fill out exactly what each one is, or if there's vendors associated with it, just from a best practices perspective, I think that it would be really great to have this completed so we can evaluate it a little bit more ahead of time. And that way, coming into this, we're instead of asking what is this, we have ideas and questions on the actual items.
So
Yeah,
part of the issue is that we're working from this, which was last year's spreadsheet, and it was
Right.
not thoroughly fleshed out. So that's the memory issue is going off of what we said last year. And I had done some of the updates, but don't have all the details. So I think Steve and I can put our heads together to flesh it out further.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you said. And, I think the exercise here that over the next probably 2 meetings until we get through the whole list is really just coming up with, what are we taking off? What are we putting on? And so I have an idea of where the board's head's at. And then I can take all that stuff and build it out with action items. And we can prioritize and fill all that stuff in, because just because it's on the, like, at least in my mind at this point, just because it's on the list doesn't mean we're going to prioritize it for this year. We're going to come back when it's all complete with action items and then prioritize based on capacity. If that makes sense. Kind
It
of is
does.
like,
It's just, it's hard to figure out, in looking at the finance and budgeting aspect, we have 11 items. It's hard to figure out exactly what everything was. If we had a little bit more of a 10-word sentence, what is this? Who's in charge of it? The action items, the dates that we're coming from, going for the next meeting, I think we'll get a lot more accomplished.
understood.
So most of the things that are blank are things that were not touched or prioritized last year. And we took off the things that were fully complete from last year, and it's in the workbook, but on a separate page, so that we now will have a page for each year so we can go back as a reference. The information technology section, everything that we had put on for last year essentially got done, which is why it's mostly blank. And again, from last year's list, I don't recall what software referred to, and it may be that there's enough happening in the IT world, unless people have additional ideas. Steve?
Yeah, no, I think that there's enough going on in the IT world. I think we can build out, similar to Karen's request for action items, was certainly a number of steps that are going to have to take place this year to get ourselves off our physical server and into a virtual environment hosted in Danvers. So that will be, that'll be relatively straightforward in building out that and what needs to get done over the next 12 months to get us there. Kind of finished all the planning stages, signed some documents, so things are starting to move, but we're not there yet.
Okay. All right, do we have bandwidth to finish the last section, or do people prefer to postpone that?
I think a couple of those items might get to an extended discussion, so maybe next time.
Okay. All righty. And we have next item J under old business to continue the discussion and possibly have a vote on the draft select board public comment policy. And it might be helpful to pull that up. And I guess I'll just say at the outset that I've sort of rethought this a little bit and have somewhat shifted my opinion, not to throw a wrench in the works, but
There was a lot of back and forth last time, but we listened to the tape a couple times today to make sure we captured everything, and really we boiled down to changing the title and adjusting the listening section to include the 2 minutes per person and allowing a second round of speaking, limited to 1 minute only if time allows.
I think that captures what we spoke about last time. It's my concern that I'll just throw out there for people to comment on. I guess I've thought again about the number 2 section, agenda item public comment. And my concern is that by allowing comments on agenda items, the select board is not supposed to get into debates with residents. And I think it's very difficult when the comments are happening at the moment of our discussion. And I think either whether it precedes or follows, certainly whether it follows our discussion, I think it's very hard not to engage in a debate and engage in a back and forth. I also think if we request that the public comment happen at the beginning and maybe extend it to make sure there's sufficient time at the beginning, it also gives us a moment to think about the comments before we actually get to our discussion. But my concern is getting into this continual back and forth throughout the course of the meeting, rather than allowing residents to have their say in whatever way they want at the beginning of the meeting, and then we do our deliberations. I guess to me it feels cleaner and less potential to go down the path of getting into debates. So I'll leave it there. And also, I guess I'll just say we might want to wait until Peter's back to finalize this completely in any case. But Karen, go ahead.
Well, using today as an example, we had stated that if it wasn't within the public input for the 10 minutes, then they weren't allowed to interject. But using that as an example, we then did not allow Courtney Ashwood or Lawrence Oak to interject on items that were on the agenda when they raised their hand to speak. So I mean, using today, it's a little bit confusing, and it's confusing to them because they wanted to speak during the time that was selected on our agenda. That's truly calling them out in order to be able to do that. But then we didn't allow that. So I'm a little confused as to where folks are to interject, specifically when we're also we're calling them out. They should be able to come up and add their 2 minutes. But I mean, using today, I don't necessarily know that that was the right move, and I'm not sure where that would have captured that on this.
Gary?
Well, I think today you have to recognize that the new policy is not in effect. And in fact, the acknowledgement by name was only because they precipitated it with the email to us. So we were just simply acknowledging receipt of the correspondence as we've done it other times. But, you know, my intent or my view on this is we need to keep this as simple and straightforward so the public understands what the rules are. So, you know, I'd be more in favor of, 2 minutes, that's it, flat period. And we had the extended discussion on the agenda, the part 2. But as I think I said before, I think our main concern there is to avoid debate between parties or between parties and the board. That's not the role of the meeting.
Thank you. So with respect to number 1, open public comment, I'm just mentioning this to contrast it in a minute with part 2. So for open public comment, my understanding has always been that it's not a time for debate or response by the board members, that it's just a time to allow the public to speak to whatever issue a member of the public wants to speak to. And that typically it would be only for items that aren't otherwise on the agenda. Although I agree this policy isn't in place now, so I don't want to, revisit what happened earlier at this meeting. For number 2, however, when there's a particular issue on an agenda, I'm not so sure I agree. I'm happy to be persuaded otherwise, but I'm not sure that I agree that there should not be dialogue or debate for an agenda item. I mean, I think that by the nature of the item, there tends to be, just in experience, someone makes a point or asks a question, there's a response. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I don't know that I agree that we should be looking to frame item number 2 in a way that discourages debate. And therefore, it may be that the allowance of 1 2-minute speaking opportunity per person should be loosened if we can do it and pass muster with KP law by, for example, saying that the chair can recognize someone for a second time, as we have in the listening session, which would allow for, a rebuttal or a follow-up question or something. So that's sort of my perspective. I'm eager to hear from any of my colleagues on this issue of it's not a time for debate, because I'm not sure that I'm tracking with that when it comes to specific agenda items.
So I guess sorry, Gary, I'll make one comment and then you. What I'm remembering, and it could be not correct, but from sort of training and orienting about being a select board member, I think that it's sort of part of the MMA best practice manual and so forth that select boards should not be engaging in debate during select board meetings. So I guess that's where I'm coming from, as sort of my recollection of that as best practice. And I could be wrong. Gary?
I think too, I think this is a model for other committees and boards in the town too. And I've seen multiple instances where an outside party, once invited into, a number 2 type scenario, that feels that they are now part of the board or continuing discussion, and that they can, continue to interject or, go for or against other actual board members' statements. So, I think that, as MMA says, the decision in the debate should be amongst ourselves, and public comment is just a matter of receiving information from outside. Not a good give and take.
And I did spend some time, it was not admittedly any kind of scientific study, but simply Googling public comment policies for Massachusetts select boards, and read, I don't know, 15 or 20 of them. And my sense from doing sort of that overview scan was it sort of seemed to split roughly 80%, 20%, where the smaller amount of towns seem to allow, at least in writing, that's not allowing for what they do in practice, that's not actually written down. So this was only written policies that I could find. Most of them tended towards public comment at the beginning, with only a few that I could find allowing it throughout the meeting. So that's just another data point, but not exhaustive, admittedly.
Right. I think deferring this because we want to allow Peter to give his input and vote on it is a good idea. And frankly, I think I'd also like to take advantage of that additional time to look at some of the same materials. I worry about maybe putting a little bit too much of a straitjacket on our meetings, because whether you call it debate or just, a coincidence of one comment that makes reference to a response to some other comment, I think it's just the nature of things is very often going to be some of that give and take. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example other than some of the more provocative ones that have come forward, but in some of our recent meetings. But certainly, there have been meetings where a member of the public makes a presentation and states a proposition, and then a member says, well, here's my view, and I don't think, I don't agree with what was said. It's kind of hard to avoid making a statement that doesn't have bear some connection to something else that was said. And I just wouldn't want to have a rule that frowned upon that, or put it under too close a microscope if we can come up with more sensible rules that avoid the kind of thing that you mentioned, Gary, of kind of an endless back and forth.
So the goal, I think, is to strike the right balance, right? To afford people ample opportunity to state their comments and their thoughts on issues before the board or the town, while also, at least in my opinion, maintaining best practice, in my mind, is to not go too far down the debate road, but maintaining best practice and sort of efficiency in running the meeting. So I guess I'd suggest taking a look, for those who have the interest and the time, to see what other towns are doing. And as you say, take this up again when all of us are here, and Peter can also weigh in. Anything further? Okay, let's move to minutes. We have an executive session of September 5th, 2023 to approve and release. We'd like to start there. Any comments on that set of executive session minutes? No, we'd like to entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the executive session minutes as prepared for the meeting on September 5th, 2023.
And we need to add the release too.
Oh, thank you. I move to approve and release the executive session minutes of September 5th, 2023.
Second.
Okay, any comments? Okay, let's vote. Deirdre, yes. Gary?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Karen?
Abstain. I wasn't here.
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, and the next one is simply to release, which have already been approved, the executive session minutes from April 2nd, 2024. Any comments on these set of minutes? Okay, someone would like to make a motion, please.
I'll move to release the executive session minutes of April 2nd, 2024.
Second.
Okay, any comments? We'll move to vote. Deirdre says yes. Gary?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Karen?
Abstain.
Thank you. And we have two sets of minutes. Sorry, open session minutes. The first is May 7th. Did anyone have comments or corrections? I did find one. Anyone have anything?
I have found 2 grammatical on both the 7th and the 21st, but nothing that would stop us from moving forward.
Do you want to mention the correction for the 7th first?
Yeah, I'll just send an email over. It's fine.
Is it just typographical?
Yeah, we just have a couple spelling errors. So,
Okay,
and like
fine.
a period where it shouldn't be, but
Oh,
nothing
okay.
from a content perspective.
Okay. I just had one correction on page 5. The word opera was used instead of ARPA. We don't have opera funding, unfortunately.
Should be fun.
Yeah.
Could be interesting. So if we could make that one correction, and then Karen's grammatical. Okay, Ben, would you like to make the motion?
Sure. I'll move to approve the open session minutes of May 7th, 2024 with the correction of ARPA, ARPA, and a clerical correction or corrections to be provided by Karen, excuse me.
Second.
Okay, vote. Deirdre, yes. Gary?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Okay, and then the minutes of May 21st, 2024. Karen, did you have
I had the same thing. I had three minor edits, so I'm more than happy to
Typographical.
send those over. Yeah.
okay, anything else? Okay, take a motion.
I'll move to approve the open session minutes of May 21st, 2024 with some typographical corrections to be provided by Karen Anger.
Second,
Okay, we'll vote. Deirdre, yes. Gary,
yes.
Ben,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
okay. That concludes our agenda items for the evening. Thank you, everyone. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Clerk, got it?
Oh, sure. Sorry. I move to adjourn the meeting
Second,
at 8:40 p.m.
second,
Okay, roll call one last time. Deirdre, yes. Gary,
yes.
Ben,
Yes.
Karen,
Yeah.
thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.
Have a good night, everyone.